Chief Thomsen, first of all, asked to be mindful of the microphone and speak into it when you're speaking so that the jury can hear you.
Yes.
For the record, could you state your first and last name and spell it for
John Thomsen, John Thomsen.
Chief Thomsen, could you explain your current employment?
Sac City Police Department.
And that's in Sac City, Iowa here?
Yes.
And in particular, what is your title?
Chief of Police.
And as the Chief of Police, could you describe to the jury some of your job duties and responsibilities?
Investigations, regular patrol.
Okay. And how long have you been with the Sac City Police Department?
16 years.
Can you briefly describe your training and education prior to becoming a peace officer?
I was in the U.S. Coast Guard for 4 years.
And then after you were in the Coast Guard, what did you do?
I went to the Sac City Police Department and attended the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy.
So you successfully graduated Iowa Law Enforcement Academy?
Yes.
Could you just bullet point 2 to 3 classes that you've taken to further your education as a peace officer?
Been to the re-interview school, several interview schools, investigating schools.
And I'm going to turn your attention now, Chief, to this investigation, in particular July 22nd of 2009. Were you contacted by the city clerk of Sac City?
Yes.
And what were you told?
I was told that the residents of 610 North 5th Street has not paid their city bill for a couple of months, and that a city worker went by and noticed that the mailbox was stuffed full of mail.
And did you know whose residence that was at 610 North 5th Street?
When I was dispatched there, no.
Did you later learn whose it was?
Yes.
And whose was it?
Mark Costers.
And again, this is in Sac City, Iowa?
Yes.
And the county of Sac?
Yes.
I interrupted you when you were describing going to the residence following a call from the clerk, but if you could tell us what happened when you got there.
I arrived at the residence and did notice that the mailbox was stuffed full of mail. I looked at all the windows, looked at the back door, looked in and noticed that the refrigerator door was propped open with nothing in it.
Okay. Did you ultimately enter the residence?
Yes.
And if you could explain how that came about.
I had the Sac County dispatcher notify Dan Coster.
And Dan Coster being Mark Coster's brother?
Yes.
Okay. And Dan Coster, did he give you permission to enter the home?
Yes.
Okay. And again, this is in July of 2009?
22nd, yes.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. How did you gain access to the home?
I kicked in the back door.
And after you kicked in the back door, did you observe anything on the door?
There was a note on the screen door.
Permission to approach, Your Honor. Chief Thomsen, I'm handing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 21 and State's Exhibit 23. If you could tell us what each one of those are.
State Exhibit 23 would be the back of the residence of 610 North 5th Street, the Costa residence. And Exhibit 21 is the note that I scanned to try to make it so it was readable.
Okay. This time, Your Honor, the state would move to have these exhibits marked 23, 21 entered into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor. 21, 23 are received.
Permission to public comment?
Yes.
Chief Thomsen, can you describe what is shown in State's Exhibit 23?
That's the back of Mark Coster's residence.
Okay. And you had described the door that you had kicked in. Which one of those two doors was it?
It'd be the right one, the one on the right.
As you can see, I published the State's Exhibit 21. And let me just ask you a couple questions about this. This is the copy of the original note that you were found?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recall what it said when you first entered?
I believe it said, "To whom it may concern, gone to Florida with Tom. See you in the spring."
I'm gonna have to hang on to this. I don't have it handy. This time, I'm showing you more of the State's Exhibit 3, which is the note that was found. Is that a fair and accurate description, or is that in fact the note that was found?
Yes, it's the original one.
And Chief Thomsen, I had to keep that exhibit, State's Exhibit 21 up there because I just showed you State's Exhibit 3, and you had indicated that that was the note that was found on the door.
Yes.
State's Exhibit 21, which I published for the jury, can you describe to the jury the process of making the image appear as it does in that exhibit?
I scan the note on a regular scanner and use a Sony program I had on my laptop computer and just change the color scales where you could read it.
And by doing that, you were able to read the note.
Yes, I'm kind of writing the impressions out so you can read it.
And in July of 2009, when you went to the residence, you observed the note as it appeared. I mean, excuse me, at the time that you first went to the home, the note wasn't faded.
No, it looked like it just wrote.
Okay. And, okay. Did you mention that there was a number on the note?
There was, yes. There was a
Okay.
number at the end.
Did you ever contact or try to call that number?
Yes, that day, July 22nd, 2009.
And did you get anybody on the other line?
Yes, a subject answered the phone saying it was the Florida Westgate River Range.
Did you investigate what the Westgate River Ranch was?
It's later on. It's just a ranch, a resort in Florida.
And did you, when you spoke with this subject or anybody else there, did you ask them whether Mark Coster was in fact staying there?
Yes. They searched the records and could find nothing.
We're still on the July 22nd, 2009 welfare check. After entering, after finding the note, can you tell us what else you did then?
We had, I believe, Dan arrived on the scene.
And before you entered the home, you kicked out the door in, is that because it was locked?
Yes, all doors were locked
And how about the windows?
the shades were pulled on all of them.
And before you had entered, had you looked through the windows and observed anything?
I couldn't see anything through the windows. The only thing I could see was through the back door where the refrigerator door was propped open.
And you say propped open. If you could describe what you mean by propped open.
It was a stick, maybe a yard stick, something holding it open.
Now, backing up, before you had contacted Dan Coster, how did you reach him?
I had the Sac County dispatcher.
And why Dan Coster?
That was Mark's brother.
And where was Dan Coster living at the time that you reached him?
Auburn, Iowa.
And
Auburn.
Dan agreed to come to the scene, as you indicated.
Yes.
Was there any other law enforcement personnel at the scene at that time?
I believe Sac County Sheriff Ken McClure arrived.
And kind of got ahead earlier, but did you indicate that Mr. Coster gave you permission to kick the door open?
Yes.
And of those two doors I showed you in that photograph, it was the...
It would be the right, the north back door.
Yeah, Your Honor. Chief, I'm showing you what I've marked as State's Exhibit 5. Can you tell the jury what State's Exhibit 5 is?
This is a diagram of the residence of the main floor that I went up and measured. So this is the scale.
Okay. When you say that you went up and measured it, when did you do that?
I believe the main floor was approximately 2 weeks or 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago.
And by measuring, did you use any tools, any other devices to create that?
Stanley tape measure.
Okay. Did you use any computer programs?
For the diagram, yes.
Okay. And is that something in your experience you've done before?
Yes, several times.
And how have you done that several times? In what capacity have you done that in?
I also do construction on the side as a side business.
Permission to publish, Your Honor. This time the state would move the enter Exhibit 5 into evidence.
Move to 5 GC. Machine. You may publish.
Sure, I'll delete the pointer. But in State's Exhibit 5, if you could describe the outlay in the rooms, in each one for the jury, please.
Not showing up on TV.
Chief Thomsen, this time I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 4, and could describe to the jury what State's Exhibit 4 is.
That's also a rendering I made with the same computer program.
At this time, the state would offer an Exhibit 4 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor. 4 GC. Permission to publish, Your Honor. Yes. Your Honor, is it okay if Chief Thomsen comes down and shows the jury the diagram of sort of the graph? So the laser pointer work, when Chief, pardon? I was asking the Chief, the laser pointer work.
If you could, Chief, describe the home to the jury.
Right there would be the door that we kicked in that entered the kitchen. There would be the refrigerator that the door was open that I could see through. See, this door actually had a window in it, which goes into here, which is the living room with a little divider where the computer was. And from there we went around here, which was an empty room, I believe, kind of a closet. They went into the bedroom. They went into really where just the dresser was. It had some clothes, and then it went into the bathroom. And then over here from the kitchen is a doorway that goes to the stairs leading to the basement.
Did you find any items of interest when searching the home?
At that time, the thing that pops was that Dan Costa, the brother, we saw Mark's, what he identified as Mark's pipe sitting by the computer.
Did you observe that pipe?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, Coach John. Chief Thomsen, I'm showing you Mr. Mark, states exhibit 1. Please,
That's the pipe that was on the computer's desk.
Was collected by law enforcement?
Yes, at a later search warrant.
Statement. Move to offer to the one in evidence.
Objection. I think so too. Well, it's previously received. It was never offered. You guys are not showing it. Okay. Anyway, it's received.
How about other Mark's personal belongings, clothes, anything of that nature?
There was clothes in the dresser.
Okay. Now, this is the first floor, right?
The main floor, yes.
And is it just a one-story home?
Yes.
Did you and law enforcement search the basement?
Yes.
Okay, and if you could, with the laser pointer, point on the diagram again where the basement's at.
Right there.
Were, during the search of the home, were there any signs of suspicious activity?
No.
Okay. Did Mark have any other structures on his property?
Yes, he had a garage.
And with the laser pointer, did you demonstrate, I guess, what direction the garage would have been?
He's sitting about right over here, and this was the driveway coming in. It was right there.
Did you locate any vehicles in the garage?
I believe it's a red 1996 Geo.
And did that come back registered to Mark?
Yes, the plate was ran and came back registered to Mark Costa.
And again, at this time, is Dan Costa with you?
Yes.
How did you leave that, that encounter and that search?
Dan explained to us that sometimes in the past or sometime that Mark has actually taken off and was missing for a year or two prior, so it wasn't out of the ordinary for him to just leave like this. So I kind of left it with him that, if he hasn't heard from Mark, in a while, to get a hold of me, and I would at least
6, I'm going to turn your attention to May 6, 2010. Did you have another occasion to come into contact with Dan Coster?
Yes, Dan came down to the police department.
And what was the nature of his visit?
He still had not heard from Mark. He was checking Mark's bank records. Nothing has been touched, so he thought at this time we should probably enter him, which I agreed.
And when you say enter him, what do you mean by
We
that?
entered him into the NCIC, the National Crime Information Center, on our computer. I had the dispatcher enter it.
Okay, and is that commonly referred to as a missing
A
person?
missing persons report, yes.
Now, did law enforcement make entry or gain entry again to Mark's residence?
I believe on May 10th.
Okay. And what did you do after you gained entry?
Well, first, I think I got a search warrant, if I recall. And I also got a hold of the Iowa DCI, or criminal investigations, to come assist.
Okay. So, yourself, DCI, any other law enforcement officials?
I believe we had a deputy with the Sac County Sheriff's Department.
And you gained entry to the home, and what did you do after that?
Collected several pieces of evidence, which being a computer stand, some CDs, several pieces of writing, and some paper.
Any of this time, and I guess backing up before, was the intention the first time that you went in the home to possibly see Mark was in harm?
Yes, it was a welfare check. We were just checking to see if he was all right.
And in the second search, anything different than the first?
The house appeared exactly as it did earlier.
And comparing the first time that you entered the home, the note as it existed, and the second time, could you explain the difference between the two?
All the writing had faded off from the weather. Like I said, it was on a screen door, so the sun and just the weather had taken the writing off of it.
You had listed a number of items that were seized by law enforcement. Was any computer equipment taken?
Yes,
And what was taken?
it was a computer tower.
Was a smoking pipe also seized, taken at this time?
Yes,
Any other items that you can recall?
CDs, paper with writing on them, just miscellaneous paper items.
And following the seizure of these items, where were they taken or delivered to?
They were taken to the Iowa DCI crime lab in Ankeny, Iowa.
And what was the purpose of taking them to the DCI crime lab?
Find evidence, fingerprints, DNA, anything that could be found on them.
In the course of this May 2010 missing persons investigation, did you or anybody in your department or law enforcement that you know of conduct a further investigation with the family and friends?
We questioned family and friends.
And in particular, do you recall, right at the top of your head?
I know DCI talked to all the neighbors.
I'm going to turn your attention, Chief Thomsen, to October 10, 2011. Were you part of a legal proceeding brought in Sac County that involved Mark Coster?
Yes.
And what was the nature of that legal proceeding?
I have Mark Coster legally declared it.
And did you testify in that proceeding?
Yes.
What was the ultimate result of that?
He was declared deceased.
Now, I want to turn your attention to November 5 of 2012. Did law enforcement receive a request for assistance by Leslie Gelson?
Yes.
Okay. Can you explain the nature of that contact and what it was for?
Assistant Chief Mark Jansen of the Sac City Police was dispatched to 610 North 5th Street, where he met Mr. Gilson.
And again, 610 North 5th Street,
being across the residence.
And did, to your knowledge, Mr. Galeson identify himself as a friend?
Well, he was the new homeowner.
And in particular, what information had Mr. Galeson relayed to the dispatch?
He was doing some cleaning and some electrical work down the basement, and he believed he discovered what was a body.
And you had mentioned Assistant Chief Jansma, but do you recall around what time this happened?
I believe it was 15:30 or 3:30.
And the first officer on the scene was
Assistant Chief Jansen.
what did Chief Jansma do when he got to the location?
He went down the basement and identified it as being a body.
Do you know whether Leslie was with him at the time?
No, I do not.
After Assistant Chief Jansma had identified that it was, in fact, a body in the basement, did he contact you?
Yes.
Okay. Did you become involved in the investigation?
Yes, I immediately went to the scene.
Okay. And describe the scene when you got there and what you observed.
I went down the basement into an old furnace room where there's a barrel, and laying on the floor was what appeared to be a mummified body.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Chief Thomsen, I'm giving you what a mark that states Exhibit 7. Can you describe what states Exhibit 7 contains?
That's the basement of the Costa residence that I also measured and made a diagram of.
And you did that using the same program?
Yes.
Permission to publish, Your Honor? Excuse me. At this time, the state would offer Exhibit 7 evidence. No objection.
7 received. And yes, you may vote.
Thank you. I'm showing the mark that states Exhibit 6, which appears to be a diagram similar to one of the upstairs you had done. Can you explain?
That's just a 3D version of the basement that I diagrammed.
Okay, is that done to scale?
Yes, that is the scale.
This time, Your Honor, the state would offer Exhibit 6 in evidence. No objection, Your Honor.
6 received.
Chief, with the laser pointer, can you identify the access to the basement and stairs?
This would be the stairs heading down.
Okay. And where was the body located?
I come down, we went around here, and there was a furnace, and then around here was this separate room, and it was laid out this way.
The best you can recall, what was the approximate height of the ceiling in the basement?
Approximately 5 feet.
5 feet tall?
Yes.
Ceiling?
Yes. maybe a little taller. I know I had to bend over a little.
You had described your first initial view of Mark's body. Was there any items located around that area you identified his body was found?
Several miscellaneous items,
Such
as clothing, household items, empty bottle of bleach, and a whole bunch of white pellets.
And in your experience, I guess, or did you later come to learn what those white pellets were?
Kitty litter.
After observing this, did you make contact with the DCI?
Yes.
What's the DCI?
The Department of Criminal Investigations, a state agency.
Okay. And did you contact any agent in particular?
Trying to pull it out.
And why did you contact Trent Valletta?
He, prior to helping me on the missing person, that first search warrant.
And shortly after your communication with Special Agent Valletta, did either one of you contact the DCI crime scene team?
I believe he did.
And why was the DCI crime scene team contacted?
To process the remains and all that, any other evidence.
Were you there when the DCI crime team arrived?
Yes.
Did you observe their investigation
Yes.
and then collecting evidence?
Yes.
Now, the owner of the home, you had indicated, was whom?
Leslie Gilson.
Did he sign consent for law enforcement search?
Yes.
Approximately what time did the crime scene team arrive? Best of your recollection.
Thinking 5:30.
5:30.
I didn't look there to be exact.
And that would be 5:30 in the morning or at
5:30 p.m.
At any point in time, following your coming to the home, did Sheriff Kevin Clark arrive?
Yes.
And did he serve any particular function in addition to his capacity as sheriff?
Yes, as the acting medical examiner.
And to your knowledge, as the medical examiner, what's his responsibility for the body?
Declare dead.
So is it fair to say at this point in time, the investigation went from a missing persons investigation to a homicide investigation?
Yes.
In furtherance of this homicide investigation, did you talk to any neighbors?
Yes.
Did you talk to any of Mark's family?
Yes.
Okay. So who were some of the neighbors with whom you spoke?
Personally, I spoke with Sandy Darrenfield.
Okay. And in Mark's family?
Throughout the investigation, I talked to a couple of his sisters and brother Dan.
Okay. In your conversations with Sandy, did she provide any information that you thought was useful in this investigation?
Yeah, she said she talked to, well, she stated that there was a guy staying with Mark, that he had a roommate for, I think she stated a couple of months.
And the period of time that she identified, do you recall?
I believe she was anywhere from February to June
Okay. June of what year?
of 2009.
Did Ms. Darrenfield identify any name in particular?
She said Tom.
And in further investigating the matter, did you find anybody with the name Tom that was of interest or concern for law enforcement?
Yes, we found Thomas Mulkey, that a check of records showed that he actually lived with Mark in the late 80s in Pounder, Texas.
Was Sandy able to provide you with the last name?
No.
Did Sandy describe anything else about Tom?
She said he was very tall, like her son, which is, I believe, 6'5", 6'6". And she also stated that he had a little dog with him all the time.
So going back to Tom, after you learned that Mark had lived with this Tom Falke, did you follow up on that?
Yes.
How did you follow up on that?
We found that Tom was currently residing in Kansas City, Missouri.
And that's Tom Falke.
Tom Falke.
Did you go down and interview him?
Yes.
And at what point in time do you remember doing that? If I told you around February 2013, would that sound?
Yes.
So you and whom else went to Kansas City?
Assistant Chief Mark Jansma, and then two DCI agents, Special Agent Valletta, and then Nate. I don't recall last name.
And how long did the interview with Mr. Falke last?
An hour and a half approximately.
Was Mr. Falke able to provide you with any information that served as an alibi for him for the months of March, April, May, June of 2009?
Yes, he stated that he was.
I guess I'd object to the answer, not the question. The witness is going to testify to hearsay, which is not responsive to Mr. Smith's question.
And in the course of this investigation, did you obtain any information that allowed for you to eliminate Mr. Tom Falke as a suspect?
Yes, we subpoenaed and got his employment records from Hy-Vee in Kansas City.
And what are those records from Hy-Vee tell you?
That he was never off more than, I believe, 2 days throughout the whole time frame we're looking at.
And also during this interview, did Mr. Falke provide you any information that helped further the investigation? In particular, did he identify anybody he believed?
To the officers interviewing him, yes.
Okay. And who was that?
John Green.
And did Mr. Falke provide information about his relationship with John Green?
I interviewed the brother, and I believe that they said they all three of them worked together in the late 80s down in Wander, Texas.
And the three of them
Would be Tim Falke, Tom Falke, and Mr. Green, and Mr. Rosner.
Okay. And you had mentioned Tim Falke, and Tim Falke was who?
Tom's brother.
Were you able to use any of your investigative tools to search for a individual by the name of John Green?
Yes.
And what did you find?
We found John David Green living from Florida originally that matched the description given by the neighbor, and also a check of his record showed that he lived in Wander, Texas at the same time.
And why was that significant? Why was his taking up residence in Ponder, Texas significant?
Because the Falke brothers both stated that they all worked together in Ponder, Texas.
And again, they being
Tom and Tim Falke.
okay. And okay. Was there any connection between Mark Hostler and Ponder, Texas?
Yes, check his records actually showed him also living in Ponder, Texas in the late 80s.
You had mentioned earlier about seizing and having the computer located in Mark's residence, I guess examined. Did you find anything noteworthy in the computer?
We found several emails from I believe a jdgeagle@hotmail.com.
I want to turn your attention to late February 2013. Did you show the neighbor Sandy a photo of the defendant?
Yes.
And could you describe the nature of the photo and how it was presented to her?
Of which the photo lineup
The first one that you showed, or the first one?
was a photo lineup of 6 individuals, one being the defendant.
And was Sandy Darrenfield able to identify any of the individuals she believed was Tom?
She picked out 2 of them, one being the defendant.
I think, sir, maybe you could just stand up a little bit further back, away from the microphone.
Now, at some point in your investigation, following the second entry into the home, did you have assistance by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation?
Yes.
Could you explain the nature of that assistance?
They went and found Mr. Green in Georgia, and they were wearing a hidden camera and went out and questioned him. They took a couple of pictures for us. Okay.
And those pictures then were sent back to you?
Yes.
And what are those pictures, I guess, describe the pictures if you would?
One was just of Mr. Green standing there, and another was with Mr. Green holding a small dog.
Those 2 new photographs that the Georgia Bureau of Investigation had sent you, did you show them to anybody?
Yes, I took those photos and brought them to Mrs. Darrenfield.
And Mrs. Darrenfield's reaction when you showed her those photos was?
Immediately said that was Mr. Green, and that was Mr. Green's dog.
Okay. Did she say Mr. Green?
Excuse me. No, she said that was Tom, and Tom's dog.
Now, turn your attention to August 13, 2013. Did you obtain Mr. Leslie Galeson's fingerprints?
Yes.
And what was the purposes of doing that?
When the body was found, when we called in the DCI, they took several pieces of evidence, which some prints were discovered, and we just wanted to exclude his.
And again, just for the jury, because there's a lot of names, Mr. Galeson was
The current homeowner who just bought the house.
in February 2014. Was law enforcement able to obtain the mobile phone number of the defendant?
Yes.
And at any point in time after that, did law enforcement obtain a search warrant to track the location of that phone?
Yes.
You recall when that was about?
Beginning of March, they added to it.
March of?
Of 2014.
I'm now going to ask you about the contact and the initial contact that you had with the defendant. First, going to March 24, 2014, did you travel to Florida to interview the defendant?
Yes.
Okay. And what other law enforcement officials were hold on 1 second here. Sorry about that. Could you explain the other or could you describe the other law enforcement officials that had gone with you?
Assistant Police Chief Mark Jansen went with us, and Special Agent Frank Widow, PCI.
The following day, were you still tracking the defendant's location with the search warrant?
Yes, every 15 minutes it would send me his current location.
And ultimately, did that lead you to the defendant the following day on March 25?
Yes.
Describe, if you could, your first encounter with the defendant, John David Green. where and under what circumstances?
And we found him in a parking lot with a white van pulling a trailer.
And did you and the other law enforcement officials have the assistance of law enforcement from Florida?
Yes,
Do you remember what agency?
the Florida Department of Investigation.
Could you, Chief Thomsen, describe your first encounter with the defendant?
Assistant Chief Jansen and I drove up to the camper, approximately, I don't know, 50, 60 feet away, and walked up and knocked on the door. And the window opened, and Mr. Green opened it and asked, "Can I help you?"
And your response?
I believe Assistant Chief Jansen explained that we were officers from Iowa. We were investigating an incident involving Mark Coster, and we were just talking to everybody that knew him.
Did you make arrangements, or did you ask him if he would participate in a formal interview?
Yes, we asked him if he would go to the local sheriff's department with us, just so we could talk to him about the incident.
Did the defendant bring anything with him at that time?
He asked if he could bring his dog.
And was that okay with you guys?
Yes.
First contact, and I'm sorry if I've gone past this, but the first communication back at the trailer with the defendant, do you recall what his questions were? What was the first?
He stated he hadn't seen Mark in several years.
And did he ask what the matter was about?
I believe so. And we stated it was just an incident. And we've been talking to everybody, and we noticed that he had lived with Mark in Ponder, Texas in the late 80s, and he was just next on our list to talk to.
So at this point in time, you hadn't told him that Mark was found in the basement?
No.
Did you ask the defendant if he would accompany you back to the station for an interview?
Assistant Chief Jansen did, and he explained that he was not under arrest, and he was free to go at any time, and he would follow or come with us.
Do you recall the agency or the building, what agency operated in that
I
building?
believe it was the Clay County Sheriff's Department.
And this again is still in Florida.
Yes.
What were the driving arrangements from defendant's camper and van back to the Clay County Sheriff's Office?
I believe that a Florida agent, Assistant Chief Jansen, and the defendant all drove in one car, and I followed in a rental vehicle.
And describe the Clay County Sheriff's Office for the jury, if you would. I mean, the building, the physical structure.
I think it's a one-floor, very large building. We went into a back way.
And the room in which you ultimately interviewed the defendant, could you describe that?
Approximately 8 by 10, 8 by 8 room, had a couch. Very relaxed there, I guess, very good pictures.
And during the interview room, including animals, could you tell us who was all in there?
It was the defendant, his dog, Sandy, Assistant Chief Jansen, and myself.
And again, Sandy, not to be confused with the previous neighbor Sandy, this Sandy that you're referring to now
It
is.
is the Pomeranian dog of the defendants.
And was this interview recorded?
Yes.
Chief Thomsen, what was the purpose of this interview?
To find out information from our suspected homicide.
Approximately how long was it?
2.5 hours.
At the beginning of the interview, did the defendant say anything about having communication with Mr. Coster? Or excuse me, did the defendant say anything about communicating with Coster when, the last time?
Several years.
Did the defendant say anything about having ever been to Iowa?
stated he had never been there.
Defendant inquire as to the reason why he was being asked questions about narcotics?
Several times.
What did he say?
When Mark was hurt, what happened to Mark? Did something happen?
And yourself and Assistant Chief Chan were the two law enforcement officials in the room, right?
Yes.
Who was the primary interviewer or investigator of the two of you?
Assistant Chief Jansen.
The information that you were providing the defendant during the interview, what did you tell him about the investigation up to that point? Did you tell the defendant anything concerning that physical evidence be possibly belonging to him? That was a poor question. Did you tell the defendant what the evidence had told you in your investigation?
Yes.
And I guess specifically what?
Just that he was in Iowa.
Okay. And did the defendant ever admit to being in Iowa?
Yes.
And during this interview also, did you and or Officer Jansma use different themes?
Yes.
And describe to the jury what a theme would be as an example.
Well, like this one, we try to minimize the crime. We make the victim more to blame. Just some bad people don't like to, when they do something wrong, they don't like to admit it, so we make it a little easier.
Your Honor, I'm going to object when we approach.
Why don't we do this, we're right next to the lunch hour, I think that needs to save. We may better use our time, better use the jury. We'll resume at